In other words, if you started to turn on your car and the motor wouldn't start, that is not a big problem. It may be a big nuisance, but it is not a big problem. Very rarely is it life-threatening. So, should you go meditate on what to do? Perhaps. But it is common sense that will help you. Sometimes if you lose your keys, it will come to you where they are, but other times you may have to search the whole house. It is a little problem. You become more effective, more competent and more able in the physical world by solving these little problems, over and over and over again. Most education is learning how to solve problems. So, why are people trying to get rid of their problems in order to be comfortable? That is like saying you don't want to be educated. Now, if little problems are attended to without so much avoidance, denial and complaint, they don't take up much of your life, and they enable you to become more aware, more conscientious and more capable in practical ways. This frees you to take on the big problem of life. The big problem poses these questions. Who are you? Why are you here? What are you here to accomplish? How do you re-engage yourself with your deeper mind? This requires asking the same questions in different ways. It requires examining the big problem from many different angles. In fact, the problem is so big that people observe it in different ways and have very different interpretations. It is like looking at a huge thing, but you can't see all of it. You can only see part of it. So, someone over here is looking at this part, and someone over there is looking at that part. And if they happen to communicate, they have entirely different stories about what they are experiencing. In this case, you may say the big problem is trying to become spiritually aware, or the big problem is trying to become really honest with yourself, or the big problem is discernment and relationships. This is all the same problem, but you are experiencing and observing it from different vantage points. This is the big problem. Even if you solve all of the little ones and have made yourself very comfortable in life, if the big problem is not attended to, you will not feel any relief, and the little ones will still preoccupy you. In an ideal or pure state living in the world, there are no intermediate problems. There are only little problems and a big problem, and most little problems can be solved by common sense. If they are neglected or avoided, or if you are not aware of them, they become intermediate problems, and then knowledge will help you. For instance, if you feel the need to go to the doctor because you have an ache and you don't get the message and say to yourself, "Oh, I can't afford it. I will deal with it some other way," or something like this, eventually it becomes an intermediate problem, and knowledge will start to prompt you to do something. You will start to feel that you must do something. You will feel the inner prompting of knowledge. Why isn't knowledge more concerned with day-to-day kinds of problems, even the aggravating ones? Why? Because knowledge is engaged in solving the big problem. The big problem is very big and affects every aspect of your life. If you are moving towards a resolution there, you are entering a new life. Here little problems continue, but they stay little. What takes the place of problems? Freedom. If your little problems remain large and contentious and absorb all of your energy, you cannot attain freedom. What is freedom? Freedom is responding to the truth within yourself and following it. Your freedom is to be able to do this. This solves the big problem and enables you to experience your worth and purpose in the world. When that is happening, self-love is natural. When self-love is happening, your relationships fall into the right order. This is freedom. People think freedom is being able to do anything they want with a minimum of hindrances or obstructions. That is not freedom. Lack of hindrance is necessary up to a point, but it is not freedom. Think of someone living in a country where there is very little political freedom, and take someone living in a country where there is a great deal of political freedom. The person in the latter case would have more advantages and opportunities, but it does not mean that they are solving the big problem in life any more effectively than the other person. It just means that their little problems are different. Remember that knowledge is involved in solving the big problem and in keeping little problems little by enabling you to solve them at the level at which they occur. Because everyone has a big problem, it generates a lot of little ones that wouldn't be there otherwise. For example, consider the idea of solving problems at the level at which they happen. This makes sense. but very few people can do it. Let me give you an example. If you lose your keys and go searching all over the house madly and you think, this must have some spiritual significance for me, or this must represent some aspect of my psychology, and you start getting involved in various kinds of speculation, then your little problem begins to represent something much bigger, and you get all caught up in the significance of this. Meanwhile, your keys are not found. They are waiting there somewhere for you to find them, but you are off in your mind doing something else. When people get involved in their own personal development in a conscious and active way, often they inflate things tremendously. Everything that happens is significant to them. Everything they feel must be significant. All of their problems represent greater truths or greater disabilities in life. Losing your keys is normal. It will happen to you regardless of who you are. Even the man and woman of knowledge will lose their keys. The man and woman of knowledge will get sick and die. The difference is in their experience of knowledge and where they are devoting their energy. Most of the things in the world that are engaging people and overtaking them are little problems that have become bigger. Either they have been neglected or given too much significance. Knowledge is engaged in the big things, but it keeps track of everything else. So, you lose your keys and you go to knowledge and you say, where are my keys? I will meditate. Sometimes it comes to you to look in a certain place, and you say, ah, wonderful. Knowledge is so good. Other times you try to focus and there is nothing there and you end up having to look all over the house anyway. And then you think, well, maybe knowledge doesn't work. Knowledge is involved in something much bigger than these kinds of things. Often when people are beginning to learn the greater community way of knowledge, they pester themselves incessantly with questions about what they should do about this and what they should do about that and how they can earn more money and how they can find true love and how they can get rid of aches and pains and on and on and on. There is no inner response and they say, either I am too stupid to get knowledge, or maybe knowledge doesn't exist. Knowledge is involved in something much bigger than these questions. It is like a scientist working on an important discovery. You must solve 90% of your problems. Be resourceful. Seek help. Learn things. This is your education in being a human being. This is how you mature as a human being, by accepting these problems, by learning to become resourceful and by solving them. But you do not want intermediate problems, for they will rob you of your time, energy and focus in life. Now let us talk about the big problem. The big problem is so big that you can't put it all into a single definition. If you have learned to solve little problems sufficiently or can keep track of them as they arise, then perhaps you will cross another threshold and enter a greater dimension of your life.